evening. My name is Therese Emmanuel Gray, and tonight I wanted to share with you from my heart about some of the different things that I see going on in this nation, in the world. And I wanted to share them with you from the perspective of my spirituality, which is based on the teachings of the Ascended Masters. Now, it's always a little bit challenging to make a video that, might push a lot of buttons for a lot of people in different ways. And I've been hesitating as to whether or not to actually put this video out for a number of weeks. And as we near the 4th of July, and as we see all that's going on in the news, I have decided to go ahead and have this heart-to-heart talk with you. Now, I found the teachings of the Ascended Masters more than 20 years ago. I was searching spiritually. I had been brought up Catholic, and I had experienced Jesus through that faith. And then I went through a period of atheism and agnosticism, and basically partied with the world. And then came to that place where I wanted to find God again. And so I first found God again through the path of Sufism, then went on to study some of the Eastern teachings, some of the New Age teachings, and I came to that realization that God was inside of me, not so much out there as an external figure, but within my heart, within my being, within my consciousness. And it wasn't long after that that I found the teachings of the Ascended Masters that had been given through the I Am movement, the Theosophical Society, the Summit Lighthouse, the Bridge to Freedom, and other organizations. Now, when I first found these teachings, and most especially the picture of the Ascended Master Saint Germain, there was such a jolt in my being, and I knew that I had found the path that I was looking for. And so subsequently in my life, I have had many experiences where the masters, who are basically beings in the heaven world, we could call them the saints of East and West, when these masters have connected with me, I have felt their presence, I have felt their blessing, I have felt also their disciplining, their pummeling, their teaching. And one of the most important people in my life in terms of helping me to connect with these beings of the heaven world was my teacher, Elizabeth Clare Prophet. The other person who really brought the Ascended Masters closer to me is my husband, Brian Emmanuel Gray. Brian had a near-death experience when he was a child, and then subsequently 2 out-of-body experiences, and went to the heaven world and has had a more direct conduit with the other side, which is oftentimes the case for people who have had near-death experiences. And so, over the years, many different confirmations and miracles took place in my life that have basically made the Masters a very real part of my day-to-day experience, of my communion with God. Now, the path of the Ascended Masters is not a path of idolatry, where we have all of these different beings that we worship. They're more like elder brothers and sisters or friends in the higher realms of consciousness who are helping us and guiding us at the soul level and at the heart level to come up higher and to expand our own personal God consciousness. Now we know that we are spiritual beings and that we are operating in these physical vehicles called the physical body. We have other bodies too, by the way. There's a mental body and an emotional body, and of course the etheric memory body. And so as we work through these four lower bodies here, our soul passes through all kinds of initiations and testings and joys and hardships, like the poet Longfellow said, in every life a little rain must fall. And then of course we have the Son of God, our own Holy Christ Self, who appears and who draws us into a closer walk with our own personal Christhood. And so this is not a path of idolatry, this is a path of becoming the fullness of our own Christ Self, the fullness of our God identity, as we peel back the layers of human consciousness, of karma, of density and maya, and all of those things that have piled upon us over the years, and not just in this life, but in many past lives, for our soul has had other incarnations. We've been around before, and the goal of life is to ultimately become free at the soul level from the rounds of rebirth so that we can function in the higher spheres of consciousness. Jesus said, in my Father's house there are many mansions, there are many celestial planes of consciousness, and we can begin to penetrate them in this experience of life, and then we can continue to expand in this God consciousness beyond the veil and beyond the change called death. And so this is the perspective that I'm coming from as I share these teachings with you. I had an experience back in my early 20s where I came very close to dying. In fact, I've had several brushes with death, but this one, literally, I drowned in the Yellowstone River, and an angel came and rescued me, and my physical body translated through time and space, and I found myself on top of the river without actually having my body move from the bottom to the top. And it was like if you take a video of a movie and you splice it, and basically you see that little splice or that little jump in the editing. That's what happened for me in my own life awareness and consciousness. It was like somehow God had spliced my life so that I could be given a new lease on life. And what I understood from that is that our lives are truly governed by a greater self than our human personality. Our lives are also basically governed by our choices and, of course, our karma. And so there is a part of us that is intended to make choices and decisions and experiment in time and space and have initiations and pass these initiations. And then there is the part of our destiny, the part of our life that to some degree is preordained, or at least, let's say, managed from a higher self that is our self, just not the self that we are normally acquainted with, like we are with the person in the mirror. I remember as a little child, my grandfather used to say to me, you'll see as you get older that you don't so much make your life, you follow it. And I'm beginning to see that he was absolutely correct. That there is this following of a greater life course. And within that following, we still have plenty of opportunities to make free will choices and decisions, and to grow, and to groan, and to travail, and to have ups and downs, and to, little by little, discover the being that we truly are. I was recently reading in an Agni Yoga book, the book called Heart, that from the perspective of our higher self, we could call it our spiritual self, our divine self, that self is only interested in our spiritual unfolding. And so the divine self, the higher self, is not so much concerned about our human comforts and discomforts, but is concerned about the development at the soul level of our spiritual consciousness. And so if challenges and difficulties and hardships and tests bring that about, then it is all good in the eyes of God. And to some extent, the wishes and wills of the human part of us are secondary. So it's just something to keep into account as we move forward with this conversation. Now, I also would like to share with you that a number of years ago, when I was living and working in Washington, D.C., I was communing with God and asking God what to do about my life, what was the goal of my life, the mission of my life, and should I be working in these different fields of endeavor that I had studied, fields like international policy and communication, and those fields in the world where I could perhaps go and make a difference. I applied and was accepted into the Peace Corps. I applied and was accepted as an intern in the State Department. And I had other internships and work experiences in various situations. At one point I even worked with the journalist Bob Novak, and so there were many different experiences, even working for America's Most Wanted. So all of these experiences teaching me different facets of life, and wondering whether that was the career and life plan I was to pursue. And it became apparent to me that there were many other people out there, good people, who were making a difference in the fields of the media, in the fields of politics and policy and international relations, and that was not the best place for God to use me, and that the place that God could use me was in actually communicating and sharing about the spiritual path and that understanding of our soul and our psychology and the process of union with God. Now, this is an unfolding process every day. I don't feel like I have by any means arrived, and so each day there is a new unfolding, and what we have been told is that we need to share our unfolding, share our experiences, share our journey, so that others might also have a reinforcement in their own path and their own realization. We're not alone, and oftentimes we find that we may have had this or that experience, and then someone comes along and basically shares a similar experience, and we say, aha, this must be real, this is a confirmation, I am not alone. And so this is why I attempt to share these things with you on video and in books and other ways, because I don't want to go back to the heaven world after this life is over and to meet in front of these beings who are called the Lords of Karma, these ones that we basically organize our life with before we come down, and not have fulfilled my reason for being. I am aware to a certain extent of certain past lives where I did not fulfill my reason for being, where I let down the master who was sponsoring me, and I went back to the heaven world, and it was a very heavy situation. Would I be given another opportunity to come back into the physical plane? Would I be given another opportunity to be born and to grow and to find the teachings of the heaven world once again, and to actually fulfill my spiritual responsibility? And so that's what motivates me, that deep awareness that I don't want to go home empty-handed. And that awareness has to motivate me and hold the balance for all of the opposing energy that we encounter when we put this kind of message out, right? People criticize, people scoff, people think you're completely nuts, people think you might embarrass them, or do embarrass them, especially if they know you or have known you. And so these are the things that we have to work through and deal with. And this awareness of the inner planes, this soul memory of the need to fulfill our reason for being, that is what carries us forward. In spite of all of the opposition, in spite of all of the challenges, in spite of all of the seductions of the world, all of those things that would take us off track. Simultaneously, we don't want to become fanatics. We don't want to become fanatics because the divine path is the middle way, like Gautama Buddha taught us, the middle way. He said, and he was talking about a musician, a lute player, if you tighten the string too tight, it's going to break. But if the string is too loose, it won't play. And so your string has to be just right. And when I play guitar, I can certainly attest to that, and anyone who plays a stringed instrument can attest to that. To have that perfect resonance. And so this is the same for our life. If we become too tight, too brittle, too set in ideas without the place for room, for growth, for love, for a softening, for shifting, we can break. And many times people do. In fact, there's been teachings of old that we're talking about the path of initiation. This path that I'm talking about is a path that goes way back to the days even of Atlantis and Lemuria and many ancient civilizations, the days of ancient Egypt. People would go in and be initiated by the Hierophant. And so what we're looking at here is a path that we have been told can literally drive a person crazy if it's not taken in stride. The only thing that can keep us going up the mountain and not fall off a cliff is the loving hand of the Master who works with us and the love in our heart. We have to do it out of love, not out of fanaticism, not out of an obligation devoid of love. And so this is why we we move forward. Love for our soul, love for God, and then love for the God in others that manifests through the soul in others. Love for the greater mission, love for the planet, love for all of the nature kingdom, the elemental beings of fire, air, water, and earth. Love for the children, love for the souls coming into embodiment, love for the souls that are leaving embodiment, and the elderly, and all. And so, having said all of this as a preamble, I wanted to share with you some of the concerns that I have and that I know in my communion with God that the Masters also have. And this is by no means an original concern, because these concerns have been expressed before. They were expressed in dictations, they were expressed in other ways where the Masters have attempted to commune with mankind and say, hey, we're looking at this from the perspective of the spirit world, and you guys better get this right or else serious problems could happen. War, cataclysm, and all kinds of things that have been prophesied and that are negative and that could come to pass. Now, the goal of life is the Ascension, the soul's permanent reunion with God. We came from God and we are intended to reunite with God, and the process in between are these lifetimes of evolution. Now there are cycles and timetables for each soul, and they are different. Some souls are older souls or old souls, and I would put myself in that category. And it's absolutely our time to become one with God in this life. And the sooner the better. Of course, it's an incremental process. It doesn't happen overnight, but it does happen year after year. Now, there are other souls who are younger souls and who may have a longer timetable of evolution, simply for more experimenting and mastering in time and space. That's their divine prerogative. We've had plenty of opportunity as older souls, and the younger souls may be on a course where they have more lifetimes before their scheduled ascension in the light, and that's perfectly fine. And so we understand that different people are at different timetables of evolution, and some people will be more goaded by this message than others. Some people will say, that's just not for me right now. Nevertheless, I would say that for every soul, the progress and path towards a greater spiritual unfolding in their own God consciousness is essential, whether it is your timetable to ascend in this life or not. And if you are going to wonder whether or not it is your timetable, perhaps the best thing is to figure out that it is, and then let God be the judge. And so we work while we have the light. And so as I look at all of these different things that are in the news, especially the different social issues facing America, there are a couple that I want to talk about. And of course this is going to bring up so many different feelings and thoughts in people, and I realize just how controversial these ones are. And because they are so prevalent in the consciousness of the people, it's really something that I can't avoid talking about. And so, the two main issues I'd like to address tonight are the issues of abortion and homosexuality as they pertain to the spiritual path, and then looking at it from a larger societal perspective. Now, I'd like to begin with the teaching on homosexuality. And I'd like to begin with that from the perspective of the understanding of the fire, the spiritual fire of the Divine Mother, the spiritual fire of the Divine Mother that is contained within the base of the spine chakra. The base of the spine chakra is the Kundalini energy. That chakra is the chakra that nourishes spiritually the sexual organs. And so this is the light of the Divine Mother, the light of Omega in form, and it is in polarity with the light of the Father in spirit, the Alpha light. And so the energies of the Divine Mother are intended to rise up the spine as a mighty caduceus action. That action is what has been shown in the medical symbol of the two snakes rising, intertwined and rising up, the caduceus. And so this is the life force, the mother energy within us. God as Mother. And then meeting with God as Father, descending from Spirit over the crystal cord that connects through our crown chakra. These two energies interlace in the heart as crystalline triangles, and they basically form the six-pointed Star of David. The Star of David is an ancient symbol, and it is the descending energies, the descending triangle meeting the ascending energy, the ascending triangle, Father, Mother, meeting in the heart, and creating that chalice for the Christ, the birth of the Son of God within our heart, as Christos. Christos means anointed. We're each intended to be anointed. Christos as Christ, as these energies basically marry in the heart. Now, what happens is that in order for our soul to make an ascension, spiritually, when our body is laid to rest at the end of this life, whether you're buried or cremated, now cremation is preferable. The soul is going to go through the ritual of the ascension if she has become that bride of Christ, if she has become that one who is bonded to the Christ self. Now, the ritual of the ascension requires a tremendous amount of spiritual fire, the fire that will impel the soul to move from octave to octave of light. I had an experience where my grandfather, I was very fond of him. He was a very staunch light bearer, freedom fighter. He fought the Nazis in World War II, and he was a musician, and he just had a tremendous amount of spiritual fire and a very strong personality. Now, he didn't have any outer faith. He had been disillusioned with Christianity as the Catholic faith and various experiences with priests and so forth, so he wasn't a church-going person. But he had a very good heart and a lot of fire in his being. And so when he passed through that change called death, I was very much grieving, and I ran into my teacher, Elizabeth Clare Prophet, and she consoled me. And a few days later said that she had been watching the transition of my grandfather on inner levels, and she had watched him rise from octave to octave to octave to octave of light. And we know from the teachings in Theosophy that there are numerous levels that we can go through. And so we move through the higher levels of the Christic plane, and then we move into the nirvanic plane, and there's even the paranirvanic plane, and all of these planes are separated into subplanes. And so, like Jesus said, there are many, many mansions, many planes of consciousness. And it is that fire of the soul that allows the soul to move up from plane to plane of consciousness. Without that level of fire, you can stay stuck in the astral plane. And the astral plane is really not a good place to be stuck in when you pass from the screen of life. It's basically the place where bad dreams come from, and it's the place that people also tend to wander through when they're partaking in drugs and other things like even alcohol and so forth. It's a place of distortion, and some of the places of the higher astral plane mimic the heaven world, and people who, for example, have LSD experiences go up there and they can see certain aspects of the heaven world from that place of the higher astral plane, but there's like a ceiling separating the two, and you can't take heaven by force, even though, like some of these rock bands have said, knocking on heaven's door and Stairway to Heaven and all of that, but it's still there's a separation in consciousness and in vibration between the astral plane and the etheric plane. And to enter the etheric plane takes that key that Jesus spoke of when he said it's like going through the eye of the needle, right? And so we want to go into the heaven world, we want to go into the etheric plane and not be stuck in the astral plane. And to do that takes that spiritual fire. So, now we want to go back to this teaching on homosexuality, because we've had many lifetimes, and probably most people have at one point or another engaged in homosexual activities in one life or another. We know the ancient Greeks certainly did, and there are many other civilizations where this was prevalent. We also know that through our different lifetimes we've been incarnate in both male and female bodies, and some people have a stronger momentum on a specific sex than on another, and so they may be required at the soul level to come in now to a female body when they've been a man many, many times before, or vice versa. And so there is still a certain soul remembrance of what it was like to be in the opposite sex and attracted to the opposite sex of that sex. And so we come into this life and we have a specific karma and also dharma or reason for being to fulfill, and it's associated with a specific body and gender. And what happens is that there are people who, of course, have a challenge with the body or the gender that they are incarnate in. And there are also records of past lives where they may have engaged in these homosexual practices, and so this creates momentum, and that momentum becomes a karmic force that can even be registered at the genetic level. Now, this creates a situation where they are attracted to members of the same sex, and this does not mean that they are bad people. This does not mean that they are not spiritual people. But what happens is that when you have the energies of alpha going to alpha, or the energies of omega going to omega, without that crisscrossing and interchange of the flow of alpha to omega and omega back to alpha, there is a blocking and ultimately a perverting of the life force in the base of the spine chakra that is intended to rise. And so it is a situation where the spiritual energies are blocked or skewed, and it is not something that leads to soul freedom and to the path of the Ascension, even though it is something that may lead to the personality's comfortable choice in time and space. So this is very important to understand. Now, the other thing we have to understand, and this is something that you can really get a better hold of if you read books like Screwtape Letters or Dialogues with the Devil by Taylor Caldwell. Screwtape Letters is by C.S. Lewis. We understand that in this astral plane that I was talking about, there are many discarnate entities, there are demons, there are fallen angels, and so there's a whole bunch of malevolent beings and forces that are continuously plotting the downfall of souls. And this is not something that's just a fairy tale. This is something that's very real. And these are the principalities of darkness that Jesus spoke of. And we need to take them seriously. Now, we're not living out of a sense of fear or a sense of paranoia, but we do understand that there are forces that seek to pull souls down. And so, one of the things that these forces on the astral plane really like to do, these fallen angels and the demons and the discarnate entities that work with them like to do, is to put people in what could be called a Gog or Magog scenario. Basically, they take light bearers, souls who have the light of God in them, good people, and they split them up into two camps. And they have them fighting against each other. And then through that fighting, they're able to steal the light that comes out of people's chakras with the discord, and they also control the entire situation. So what we find in America and in the world are basically, we could say, two camps surrounding the homosexual issue. Those who are either engaged in homosexual practices or support those who do by wanting to be kind and benevolent and understanding and tolerant. And many of these people are people of great light and earnestness and goodwill. And then you have those who have been raised in a traditional setting of traditional values, moral values, Christian values, Muslim values, and so forth, Judaic values that basically want to honor what has been written in the Bible or in other sacred texts concerning the practice of homosexuality. And so these ones say, this is against God's will. And so they are also coming from a perspective of good and earnestness and spiritual legitimacy. Now, what happens is that these two forces are pitted against each other, and what we find is that the more that the people who are from that traditional perspective become, let's just say, challenge the issue from a more vehement and fanatical standpoint, the more it empowers the other side. And it becomes this situation that can literally divide an entire nation or entire world between the so-called loving people and tolerant people and the so-called faithful people and traditional people. And so what we find is that there is such a split that takes place, and this is all accompanied by such a number of thought forms and media-induced thought forms and all of that. And pretty soon, every side is enslaved to one position or the other. And in all of this, the true teaching is lost. And the true choice for the soul. Now, if a person is engaged in homosexual practices and has a homosexual lifestyle, they do so of their own free will. And it is only out of free will and the higher understanding of the path of the Ascension and the true equalization of the masculine and feminine forces within an individual that is going to perhaps compel them or in some way influence them to seek a higher way. Now, we have to also understand that when it comes to the misuse of the sacred fire, when it comes to the misuse of this light that I'm talking about, this misuse of light happens all the time within heterosexual individuals as well. It happens all over the place. When you look at all of the pornography that's going on, even between men and women, if you look at all of the practices that are being encouraged upon the youth, even at the level of the school system. If you look at, the other day I was in a doctor's office with my daughter, and I got to read in a normal magazine, the kind that you find on the doctor's table, about a famous person and his oral sex experiences. In fact, I got to read about two of them, two different famous people and their oral sex experiences, and I thought to myself, my goodness, I'm sitting in a doctor's office and this is available to every child and teenager who comes in here, and it's become so commonplace that there is absolutely no boundary. People share everything about their sexual experiences and they promote them, and you look at the style of everything from what's popular in terms of dress and music and so forth, and what's going on in the movies and all of that, and it's very, very hard to keep your head straight, even if you're, quote, straight. So, having said this, we have to understand that this misuse of the base of the spine chakra takes place by so many people, if not almost everyone on this planet at this time. This misuse of the base of the spine chakra also happens through the heavy beats that we find in the music, the rock music, rap music, heavy metal, all of those heavy beats, and of course the accompanying lyrics, the entire consciousness of death and hell that comes through a lot of these lyrics. And we have to understand that these beats produce a downward spiral within the Kundalini mother light of the chakras. And so even at that level, there's a siphoning out of that energy. And so why am I bringing all of this up? Because we're not here to condemn. We're not here to judge. We're here to free. And as long as we're in a position of condemning one group over the other, the homosexual and or supporting group calling Christians and traditionalists haters, and then the traditionalists and conservatives just going all out in basically having a very critical and over-the-top, uncompassionate attitude towards the homosexual agenda out of fanaticism. Now, both of those sides energetically are pitted against each other, orchestrated through the force of hell, and both groups feel perfectly justified in their position. And there cannot be any spiritual progress in that way. In some cases, the fanatic hatred that can come about is even worse than the homosexual practice. Now, it doesn't mean that the homosexual practice is good. It just means that we have to understand that it is only through a higher place of wisdom and love and a true desire for oneness with our divine self, oneness with God, and service to life, that we can come out of this. And so, as all of this is going on, and every day I look at the news and there's a new article about something having to do with the homosexual situation, whether it's, it's just every day it seems like there's a new article about this. Meanwhile, there is not as much said or done about the issue of abortion. Now, in my opinion, the issue of abortion is far more grievous than the issue of homosexuality, even though, you could say that the two go hand in hand, though that's not necessarily so. The issue of abortion has to do with souls being denied the opportunity to come into life and fulfill a divine plan. Now, this divine plan may be fraught with all kinds of challenges, negativities, difficulties. They may not be wanted. They may be conceived in a dreadful situation. Nevertheless, every conception has been preconceived in the etheric plane before the conception happens in the physical plane. There's a conception that happens before the physical conception. And in the computer mind of God, this takes place. Now, this can be a karmic circumstance, it can be a very challenging circumstance. The soul has the right to live. The soul has the right to experience hardship. The soul has the right so that it can ultimately pass its initiations and have that opportunity to become more of its divine reality. And so when a soul is denied entrance and goes through this gruesome operation called an abortion, and it's been shown that the fetus feels at the earliest time of life, and even if the fetus is just a few cells, the soul attached to the fetus is going to feel it on the other bodies, the mental body, the emotional body, the etheric memory body. And so even if there's hardly a physical body formed, there are these other bodies. And so we have to understand that this is truly a crime against humanity. And this is a situation that, just like the homosexual situation, agenda and situation, I'm saying agenda as the agenda on the astral plane of the force of darkness, using this issue as a divide and conquer. So they do so with abortion. And so we have those who are the defenders of women and women's rights, and the women's right to choose, and men not having to dictate to women what they should be able to do about their own body, and so forth, versus those who understand that we're talking about a new life, and we have to understand that this divide and conquer is also orchestrated at the level of the astral plane, and that there are good people in both camps. Good people in both camps. And it's only through education and understanding that this abortion issue ultimately will be solved. When doctors no longer wish to perform this dreadful act and procedure, when women are able to fully have compassion for the life that is choosing to come through them, support the women and not simply call them hoes. And when society is able to offer the assistance that's necessary for families and children to be raised, we're living in an economy and a society and a lifestyle that makes it so difficult for children to come in and be raised. It's easier, way easier, and way more a la mode to have a pet. Does anyone ever give you a hard time for having a pet? Dog, a cat? Well, maybe in a few places where they want your dog on a leash or something. But overall, it's totally trendy. Now, having a number of children in a lot of places is not all that trendy. And I speak from experience, having 4 myself. Now, each child has the right to life, and each one sitting and listening at this was given that right to life. Now, you may have a difficult relationship with your parents. You may have had all of these hardships, but you're still alive. And you're still breathing, and you still have free will, choice, and time and space. And this is what each one has the right to have. And this issue is of much more dramatic impact, spiritually speaking, on the large level of the ecosystem, the spiritual ecosystem of this planet, than even the homosexual agenda or other things that we see going on, from the problems in the economy to potential wars going on to the drug trafficking and all of these different things that are out there, the human rights violations, the child slavery, and on and on. There's so many things, the pollution of the oceans and the air, and all of these things that are out there that are very difficult and very challenging. There is none more challenging and grievous than this issue of abortion, and this issue tends to be overlooked or denied or biased. And it is my hope that someday we will look back on this issue just like we look nowadays at slavery, and we say, how could this have been? How could people have said that black people were part horse, part animal, therefore had the right to be enslaved? And how could people say that this child growing in the womb with 4 lower bodies, with a soul, was not a person until it literally came out of the belly? That this soul that has already arranged a divine plan with the masters in the heaven world, their own spiritual sponsors, come in with a life plan and a mission, could be denied that mission and be killed in a gruesome way before even being allowed to exit their mother's body. The place that is intended to be the safest becomes a killing field, worse than the gas chambers in Germany. And so, these are things to ponder. These are things to pray about. Ultimately, we're talking about the changing of hearts. We're talking about the changing of consciousness. And you may wonder, well, what difference is one more video or teaching on this going to make? Every time we put forth this message, this understanding, and share it with others to whatever degree that we are able, after we have internalized it, this creates a greater shift in consciousness, because we are all one. We are all one. And so, one by one, we defeat that agenda that's going on on the astral plane, where those forces of darkness are seeking to orchestrate the downfall of many souls, the downfall of nations, the downfall even of our planet. And we understand that through our free will we can bring in that consciousness of the etheric plane that we so much want to return to when we, at the conclusion of this life, leave our body for the last time and move on into higher realms of consciousness. And so these are my thoughts on this 4th of July time of the year, and I truly share them without any sense of condemnation, but with this great understanding of where people come from. Once upon a time, I was pro-choice when I was in college. I was pro-choice. I even wrote an essay in this course that was called Our Bodies, Ourselves. It was a women's class. And I wrote an essay about why we should have that right to choose and why it's okay to have abortions. And there was a girl who stood up in the class, and she took the stand for life, and she was so criticized as being out of touch with reality, dumb, too religious-based, or whatever the different arguments were, naive, unsophisticated, backward. And I also held those thoughts about her. I don't know her name. I don't know what has become of her, but I remember watching her courage in the face of all of those thought forms. I remember her courage and how she never backed down. And so, without condemnation, we seek that higher truth and that transformation. Without condemnation, we understand that in this life or past lives we have engaged in all kinds of different sexual practices. And we've engaged in the abuse of our body and the bodies of others. We've engaged in the misuse of that mother light, Kundalini energy flow. And God has given us another opportunity for life, for growth, and for coming home. We also understand that until the person, the individual, and the soul has come to that realization from within, we cannot force a choice upon them. Ultimately, because even God does not force his choice, her choice upon us. We have free will to be or not to be. And if we choose with our free will to deny another's opportunity to be or not to be, then we will have made a karma that we do not want to be on the receiving end of. So let us pray about these issues. Let us uphold the best in one another. Let us enlighten through the higher wisdom that comes from the teachings of the heaven world. thank you for your time, sharing this time with me, and I appreciate your goodwill in the face of issues that are so challenging on an individual and collective level. And I appreciate all of the spiritual work that we can do together to bring the consciousness of an entire planet and her people to a higher place. God bless you, and happy Independence Day from the entire groupthink of this world. God bless you.